brilliant. So that can also now be watched on focuswales.com/out-of-focus. We're on our way. Brilliant. Okay. So as I said, I'm joined by Andy Warnock from the Musicians Union. Andy is going to run us through a presentation, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So please, if you are participating in this session, use the Q&A chat box in your webinar to ask those questions, and I'll direct them to Andy at the close of the session. I will stop my share, and I will, Andy, hand the baton over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just do this. So share the screen. Open up that one. Okay, can everyone see that? Can you hear me? I'm hoping that you all can.
Yeah, it's looking good for me.
Good, great. All right, let's start this presentation. Good, right. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. So my name's Andy Warnock. I'm a regional organizer for the Musicians Union in Wales and South West England. And we're going to be talking about various forms of support in relation to COVID-19. So actually not just MU support. I'll kind of touch on all sorts of different areas. Also, I'm going to try and leave some time for questions at the end. I'm not exactly sure how many people we've got with us, but we'll leave some time for questions at the end, hopefully, and then see if anyone's got any of those. So first of all, a bit about the Musicians Union, in case you don't know anything about us. So we are the trade union for musicians in the UK. Started in 1893, so we've been going a long time now. We've got about 32,000 members at the moment, all across the UK. And basically everyone's welcome to join. We're not specific to any genre. It doesn't matter what genre you work in or what area of the UK you work in, or indeed if plenty of our members work internationally as well. We provide a whole range of specialist advice, services, and benefits all across the UK. So we've got 6 regions. Wales and South West England is one of those. And we've also got 6 specialist sections which look at kind of specific areas of work, whereas the regions are more kind of general. So those are live, music writers, orchestra, R&B, education, and theatre. And if you're not a member at the moment, then we've got a whole range of membership offers. So let's have a think about the kind of support in relation to COVID-19. The caveat that I need to give here is that this could all change. This could all change very quickly. I was trying to have a little bit of a look at what was being said in the briefing this morning in relation to England, and I feel like this could be out of date tomorrow to some extent. So we'll see how that goes. In some of the slides, there'll be a note on some of the sources of information that are out there, and I'd say just keep an eye on those. Basically, as many of you probably have been already, but things could change quickly. They have been changing quickly, and certainly for us, and I think other organisations, it's kind of a scramble to keep up a lot of the time without much warning as to when different things come in. So that's one caveat. The other is that there's obviously been a lot of support for companies throughout the kind of last 6 months about this crisis. So things like business rate relief, loans, grants, other schemes. I'm going to kind of put those to the side for the moment and just think about support for individuals, because of what we do and also the nature I expect of the people who are going to be watching. And then the third thing is that the main kind of government financial support through this crisis has been through the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, which is the furlough scheme, and the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. And really one of the main points I'm supposed to make about the financial support that I think people across the music industry and other sectors have been making is that really the only way through this crisis is through government support. It's only government, and really specifically, the UK government initially, that has the resources to get musicians and workers in a whole host of sectors through this crisis. Organisations are doing their best to plug the gaps, but none of them can offer anything on the scale of those 2 schemes. And one of the problems is we know that those two schemes have got really significant gaps. I think when we did a survey, over 30% of our members fell through those gaps from memory. We know that there are really significant gaps there. And so I kind of want to acknowledge that and say that, that's something we've been working on, and we'll kind of look at lobbying a bit later. But also those schemes have kind of happened to some extent. And there is plenty of information online from the government. So I'm kind of going to leave those to one side as well. But if you have got any specific queries about those schemes, then please do get in touch, especially if you're a member. So for instance, especially with the furlough scheme, there have been some questions about, people going back to work and the process of that. It's possible, and we don't like it, but it's possible that people might be facing some changes to their terms and conditions if you were, do some employed work and you were furloughed, or indeed that unfortunately people may be facing redundancies at some point. So if you've got questions about those schemes, please do get in touch. But as there's kind of some information out there about them, like I say, I'm going to kind of leave them to one side. So the first 2 points are really, now these are for MU members. So if you remember listening, these are for you. The full details and eligibility criteria for these are on the website, or you can get in touch. The details are on the website, or they'll be at the end of this presentation. So the first of all, there's the MU Hardship Fund. The executive committee made the decision to invest £1 million of the MU's reserves in setting up a hardship fund, and we also had support from other organisations and done our own fundraising, which has helped add to the money. So those are small grants of £200 for members facing financial hardship. That the scheme aims to be, they're small grants, but it's a quick turnaround time, and the applications are via the website. So please do look there, or get in touch if you've got any questions about that. But I think most questions should be answered on the website. And then the kind of slightly newer thing is the subscription holiday, where you can get a 3-month holiday from payment of MU fees. Essentially, that's not the same as some of the other kind of financial holidays that have been out there, in the sense that we're not expecting you to pay it back. It's not kind of a break where you still have to pay it later on. It's just 3 months off your membership, essentially. Again, for members facing financial hardship, and again, the details are on the website. So those are kind of 2 specific things that we've done to help members, and I'm sure the executive committee are considering, what else can be done. The next thing, this is more for everyone. Now, Help Musicians is kind of one of the major charities for musicians in the UK, as I'm sure most people are aware. Now, as far as I'm aware, what they're calling their financial hardship phase 2 funding is still open, as far as I'm aware. Not necessarily for much longer, because my understanding is that was the kind of closure of that was timed to coincide with the end of the furlough scheme at the end of October. But at the moment, I believe that's still open, and that's my understanding. And that they can provide potentially, a higher level of support than the Musicians Union can do. And obviously, that their role, as a charity on an ongoing basis, is to provide support for musicians. So if you're struggling and you're facing financial hardship, then I would definitely look up their information and get in touch with them. So the next one is the PRS Members Fund. This is less well known, and kind of like our schemes, it is for PRS members, and there are criteria. But if you are a PRS member and you are struggling financially in the current crisis, then I would really recommend looking that up and getting in touch with them. What we've got next? I mean, there are other schemes. That's the other thing to say. There are other schemes. I know AIM have got one. There are others out there. So rather than listing them all I'd say is that there is information available on these different schemes. And I would just recommend, there's some sources of information that will come up on later slides. So I'd say look up there's too many to list really for me at the moment. I don't want to try and list them all and miss them off, but there is information about that I'll come to later on that I'd recommend looking up. The next thing is Focus Wales is a Welsh festival, of course, but this isn't going to apply to everyone. I don't know where people are listening to this from, but if you are in Wales, hopefully you'll have seen that the Welsh Government has set up a cultural recovery fund, which is using £53 million of consequential funding that the Welsh Government received from the, I think it's £1.57 billion that the UK government was investing into culture. Now, some of that is going to companies and it's going to museums and local authorities, but what they have got is a fund for individuals. I think they're calling it a freelancers fund, but definitely there is a fund for individuals, and you can find information on that via the website. There's some eligibility information because it's not open yet. So do look up that information. That's going to provide, well, my understanding is that that's going to provide some grants to individuals, freelancers and self-employed people in the creative and cultural industries, focusing really on those who've fallen through the gaps of the schemes so far, as I mentioned earlier, who are, in groups like the fact that they've only been self-employed for a short period of time. Maybe they do short-term employed PAYE work that it wasn't possible to be furloughed from, those who earn amounts that meant they weren't eligible for the self-employed income support scheme, or whether the balance of where their work comes from meant they didn't meet the criteria. So if you're someone who hasn't benefited from one of the schemes so far and hasn't received support, then you should be the focus of that fund. I definitely recommend, like I said, it hasn't opened yet, but look up the information on the website. I think they are going to be updating that information as they go along. I'm hoping for MU members that we'll be able to set up a session with someone from Welsh Government to talk to members about that scheme and what it involves. So that hasn't opened yet, but definitely do look out for that if you're in Wales. And then the final thing, almost the final thing. So the problem in England that musicians and other kind of people in the creative industries have got is that the UK government hasn't, either directly or through the Arts Council, provided those same types of grants directly for individuals. But what you can do potentially is apply for an Arts Council England grant to support project work. Now, I think the problem with that is that there are obviously going to be huge demand on those grants at the moment, but it is potentially something you could look at. Again, there's information on our website. I would recommend having a look at that. And you may be able to get in touch, we may be able to answer questions that people have on that. The final thing that I haven't put on there, because it's not really something I can advise on in detail, is benefits. And, that is potentially one of the ways, if you are struggling financially, if your work, as most musicians has been affected by COVID-19, then that is somewhere to look. I'm not an expert on that. We don't advise on that. I'd advise looking up the information on places like Citizens Advice and on the government website. And listen, there's all sorts of debate about the benefit system, and I wouldn't want to advise anything at the moment other than if you are struggling financially, that's something to look at. I would really urge you to look at all the options that are available to you, and Citizens Advice is a good place to start. The other caveat, that I should have given actually in relation to some of this is that really here I'm kind of focusing on Wales and England because that's what I know about, at least to some degree. Now, if you're in Scotland or Northern Ireland and you're watching this webinar, then there is information about the support available in Scotland and Northern Ireland on our website, and in some of the other sources of information that I'll link you to. We have an office that covers Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's one of our regions. So look at the information on the website on that and get in touch with them, and they should be able to answer your questions. I'm pretty sure in Scotland they've got some sort of funding for individuals, like there will be in Wales. I'm not sure Northern Ireland has made a decision yet, but like I said, I'd recommend looking at the information on the website because that is not so much my area of expertise. So that's the financial support. I think the other side of this, there's an ongoing need is the information and guidance. The first thing is this website, coronamusicians.info. Now, this has been set up by a whole group of organisations, I think led by Help Musicians, That has got, it's updated fairly regularly. I think the last time was 3 days ago, so just before the weekend, and it tells you when it's been updated. It's updated regularly. That brings together and collates information for a whole range of organisations in one place. So I would really recommend, if you want information, you want support and guidance, go to there, because when I said I haven't listed every organisation's different scheme, that website will have a much more comprehensive list. So I would go there and that will be updated. That's a really good source of information. The next thing I'd say is that we have been sending out kind of throughout this crisis regular emails with kind of news, updates, guidance for musicians, specifically around COVID-19. And those are for members and non-members. So you don't have to be a member of the MU to get those emails. I think they're going out twice a week now, or more often if there's something kind of really important or urgent. And those are just specifically about what's happening to do with COVID-19 rather than any of our other work. You can sign up to those on the website. So I'd recommend having a look at those if you do want info. I know that even twice a week is quite often, and I've definitely heard from some people who say, they don't always read them. Sometimes they just don't want to. They just skip straight past them. But of course, if you are getting them, you can always go back and look at them. And there are times when, mindfully, there's important updates. Alongside that, on our website, we're doing regular news updates when things change. Those should mainly be caught by the emails, but it might be worth going and looking at those every now and then and looking through them. And we hope those are helpful. We also have been publishing our own guidance for musicians on everything that's going on. So if you go to our website and go to the advice section, there's a specific advice section on coronavirus, and that's got loads of different pages. It lists the kind of financial support, our financial support and others. It's got different sections on things like contracts, live work, teaching work, recording work. It's got links to the various different documents, as well as our own guidance. There's things like, I think there's a risk assessment information, a risk assessment template that you can find there, that you can look at. It's pretty detailed, and it is being updated as we go along. I guess the other thing actually to put in alongside those two is there have been kind of news items or kind of almost blog posts as we've been going along from people on things like streaming gigs, teaching online, and a whole lot of different subjects about the different ways of working that people are looking into. So those might well be of interest. I'd recommend going on and just having a look through those. Even some of them will be quite far back, but hopefully you can find them somewhere. Those might well be of interest. What that MU guidance ties into, of course, is the government guidance, and that government guidance will be different depending on which nation of the UK you're in. It'll be different in Wales compared to England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So I haven't listed that on this slide, but obviously that is a really key thing to be aware of. It was only last week that there was advice published on the performing arts in Wales, but that now is there. I think it's going to be updated. We understand as we go, it's not a final document, it is a live document, and so we're going to be feeding back comments to the Welsh Government about that. But there is now guidance in Wales as well as in England, and I believe there is in Scotland at least too. So definitely check that government guidance, and our guidance is really meant to sit alongside that. So it deals with things like whether your PLI is valid or not. It deals with advice on risk assessments, health and safety, all those kind of things. It goes into a bit more detail about our advice for members compared to that basic government guidance. But that government guidance is your starting point. The next thing is individual advice. Especially if you're a member, do get in touch and we'll do our best to help you. I have to say, we are very busy at the moment because understandably a lot of people have got questions. So do get in touch, but also do bear with us because we're trying to get through everything as quickly as we can. And also, one of the problems of this whole situation is that there aren't necessarily clear answers to the questions that people have, and that is very frustrating for everyone. It's frustrating for us as well as members and musicians. Unfortunately, the nature of things means that we can't always give a very clear answer, and sometimes we have to say no. And like I said, things are changing all the time. We've had members who unfortunately, had gigs and work cancelled when the Rule of Six guidance came in England. Was it last week or the week before? So things are changing. There are things, unfortunately, that are unclear, but we are doing our best to give that guidance on an individual basis. So please do get in touch if you remember and you want that help. And then the final thing is, of course, if you need it, we can get legal advice on some of these things. Certainly on the furlough scheme, for example, there was a whole host of legal advice that we got on that a few months ago. So there is the potential to get that. On the website, there's some basic information on things that have become relevant or have always been relevant, particularly relevant during the crisis. So things like frustration of contracts, force majeure clauses, things like that. But again, if you remember, we can potentially get the specific legal advice if you need it and if it's helpful. So then the next thing is return to work. Now, again, the caveat here with all of these slides is that I'm very conscious this could change very quickly, especially after the briefing that there's been this morning and things like the local lockdowns. This is changing all the time, but we do know that we want members to get back to work where they can, when it's safe to do so, when it fits with the regulations and the guidance. So the first thing on that is to check the government guidance. Like I said, it is changing all the time, and I'd say we do our best to answer the queries, but that's not really a substitute for this stuff is pretty lengthy and complicated. But the more you can, people can look at it and start with it themselves, the better, I would say. And also because for things like risk assessments, as much as we obviously will try and help members, we can't do everyone's risk assessment for them. So I think the starting point has to be checking the government guidance and trying to be as clear on that as you can be. As I said, we've also got our own guidance, so please do look through that. And if you think there's a gap in that, then do let us know, because we're trying to work on it. Risk assessments and health and safety are obviously really key, always been important, but particularly important at the moment. And then there are things around those that need to be tailored, whether that's to do with ventilation or who should be going to work, how the work's carried out. It's really important those risk assessments are done properly. Or if you're going to work somewhere like a venue, for you to be confident that they've gone through the right processes, done the risk assessments in the right way, and that it is, broadly speaking, a safe or low risk place to work. So as I said, there's information on the website. There is a risk assessment template, I think, that you can look at and download, and that should be a pretty good starting point. There's a couple of pages there. I think there's depending whether you're going in a venue or doing more of that yourself. As I said, please do get in touch, potentially around legal advice. Again, as I said, one of the problems I think that everyone has got, and there's not really an easy solution to this, is that the nightmare is people have started to get back to booking in work, but as the regulations change, that becomes really difficult, because work that gets booked in might have to be cancelled again. Looking into next year, it's really difficult. I know venues, it is kind of a question of when do you reschedule shows for, but we can potentially get legal advice on a lot of different things that are happening. So please do get in touch. We are doing some online events. Those are, have a look on the website. There are various events that we're doing on a different range of things. If you're in Wales, I would also recommend looking up Cult Cymru. And if you haven't come across that before, that's a training project that we participate in, as well as the other creative unions, BEC2, Equity, and the Writers Guild. And Cult Cymru is there at the moment. Does ongoing training, which has kind of moved online during the crisis. But we're also looking to expand that to cover, in things that we think are particularly important and useful in the current time. So on things like risk assessments and health and safety, well-being, those sorts of things. So do look at those. The other thing that unfortunately I've forgotten to put this on the slide, but I believe this will be covered on the Corona Musicians website, is there are sources of support out there. You know, if you're struggling, so more kind of mental health, well-being support, that is out there. Do look up. Music Minds Matter, I think, is the one that's run by Help Musicians, but there are others. There should be links to that on the Corona Musicians website, or Help Musicians will have some details of that, and I'm pretty sure our website does as well. You know, that's another side to this that, you know, certainly I'm very, very conscious of, that, you know, the financial issues are one thing, and of course they're related to you know, well-being issues often, but of course, you know, you can be struggling with your mental health, regardless of your financial situation. I think that's particularly acute at the moment. So I would really recommend looking up those sources of support, those helplines. I mean, as well as all this, as I said earlier on, you know, there's a sense in which some of these issues can only be solved by the government. I think most of us would agree that, unfortunately, in some key areas, you know, the government's support has been sadly lacking, and just ultimately hasn't been good enough, you know, to do with the people that have fallen through the gaps in the schemes, and the lack of support for industries that are really struggling at the moment. So another thing you can do is help us to campaign for more support. You know, we're all the time lobbying the UK government, the Welsh government, across the UK. We are campaigning for more support, and you can help us. You can help us do that. There's information on the website about how you can do that under the coronavirus pages. You know, one of the things we've been asking people to do for a long time is write to the Chancellor, you know, and highlight the issues that musicians are facing throughout this crisis. Highlight them for the Chancellor. But I'd also say it's worth looking at writing to your MP and or your MS, your member of the Senedd, if you're in Wales. You know, depending on what your query is on, you know, if it's to do with the furlough scheme or the self-employment support scheme, you know, those are UK government. Those are UK government issues. I'd recommend going to your MP for those. If it's about the Welsh government's guidance and their specific work, then your MS. And of course, remember, if you've got questions about the guidance, you know, you can potentially go to your local representative as well. And certainly, you know, our campaign is ongoing on these issues, because, you know, there are still, you know, things are changing all the time, and we still need more help to get musicians and the music industry and the wider creative industries through this crisis. That's about it, really. I'm going to kind of wrap up there. I think we've got 45 minutes overall, so I'm going to wrap up there and take some questions. My final thing is, yeah, if you do want to join the MU and get our you know, get our support, then you can. There's a variety of membership offers, including our join for £1 schemes. If you're a student, you can join on a student membership rate. If you're not a musician, you know, or you're not kind of you work in the music industry and you wouldn't be an MU member, then we've got a supporter scheme where you can join up to get emails about our campaigns and how you can support our work. And this isn't so relevant at the moment, but of course, you know, we do have other schemes like our Fair Play venue scheme, to make sure that musicians get fair treatment. And that's about it, really. That's the contact details for our office. Or, as I said, you can go on the website to find a lot of this information and contact details for my colleagues in other parts of the MU. And then we'll take some questions, I think. I can see that there's Q&A and chat things popping up. So let me see. Let me see if I can have a look at some of those. Right. So I haven't done one of these webinars before. Let's just go through some of these questions, shall we? I'll do it just by chatting. So someone's asked here, are you coordinating with PLA and BEC2 regarding lobbying the government for extended furlough and self-employment income support scheme support? And the answer is yes, absolutely, all the time. Before those schemes were announced, while they've been announced, in relation to the gaps. And now, because we know that they're coming to an end, at a time when actually people can't really go back to work, and it seems like that certainly there are local restrictions, and we might be going back to some sort of national restrictions. So we're absolutely lobbying on those things all the time. We're pressing government and highlighting the need for further support. I believe we've recently done another survey of members that we hope will help give us some further information to support that lobbying. I'd also say that in Wales, we've been in conversations with the Welsh government, and with those conversations are continuing. The funding that they've announced is positive, but we're also in other conversations with them about guidance and return to work and further support and all those kind of things. So those conversations are ongoing. So yeah, that's absolutely a focus for our work. Someone has asked, they're born in Wales, recently moved out of Wales into Somerset. Would they be eligible for Welsh schemes for support? I can't give you a definitive answer to that, although I suspect, unfortunately, the answer is that if you're not based in Wales anymore, I suspect, unfortunately, the answer is no. I would recommend checking that yourself. As I said, it's different in England. You might need to look up some of the information on Arts Council England and schemes like that. I suspect the answer is no, but I don't want to say that's not completely definitive. I would recommend having a look yourself as well. But I suspect they're mainly going to be focused on people that are actively in Wales at the moment. I think, are there some more questions in the chat? Let's have a look here. I'm sorry, I couldn't read the chat while I was talking. So someone has asked, they looked at the government individual help. It didn't really fit someone who is just starting, as you had to show proof of income. Is there a way of getting financial support if you have just finished a music course? Yeah, this is problematic, unfortunately. There's not really a way of answering this. As I say, that is a problem. I can't, unfortunately, remember, I don't know where this person asking this question is based. I can't remember whether the Welsh Government's freelance individual funding is going to include those who are just starting out. I can't remember. It'd be worth checking if you're based in Wales, but we're aware that is one of the gaps. Those people who are either just have or just are entering the profession and starting work are a real gap and have been missed by these support schemes. So I can't give you a kind of easy or simple answer to that, unfortunately. I know that there are people who are really struggling, at the moment, and all I can say really is that I'm really sorry about that. Please do check the information. If you've got any questions, please do get in touch, and we'll do our best to help. But off the top of my head, check the Welsh scheme definitely. I think the answer, unfortunately, will be no if you've only just graduated, but it is worth checking. And beyond that, that's a gap, and we are lobbying for that, for the support to continue, because I think the problem is if you're someone who had maybe still been studying, this crisis started in the spring. We're now in the autumn, and if you're someone who was just kind of entering a profession, that's quite a different context, potentially. So we're aware of that gap, and we're continuing to push for support. We're not alone. There are a whole host of organisations in the music industry, creative industry, and elsewhere who are saying, that ending these schemes at the end of October when we're about to go into winter just is not good enough. And there are people really struggling. So we hope that that we're going to be heard. That those comments are going to be listened to and taken into account. I can't see. Okay, cool. So there's another question here. Do you have advice about online music teaching, e.g. safeguarding? I think schools have rules, but where do self-employed tutors go for guidance on this and face-to-face teaching? And that is a question I can answer. And the answer is yes. If you go on our website, There's kind of ongoing, kind of normal, for want of a better word, safeguarding advice for kind of normal times, as it were, which is going to apply clearly as people start to go back to schools. If you haven't, and you've returned to face-to-face teaching, if you haven't seen that before, but there's also more specific information on there about safeguarding in relation to, oh, there we go, there's a link there. That link just in there is the main education page. I have a feeling some of the specific online safeguarding stuff is under the coronavirus help pages, but there is specific advice there about online teaching. And if you've got specific issues, then please do get in touch again. I'm very conscious that there we go, there's another link. Thanks for putting those in there. You know, this is a key time for music teachers, and so, you know, we're expecting to be dealing with well, you know, we hope that you know, these things will be able to be worked out, but we are expecting, you know, there to be issues here and there to be navigated with music teachers. Yeah, so again, please do get in touch for more detailed answers. Okay, good. I think that's all the questions we've got at the moment. I think, if I'm right. There we go. We've ended up a bit ahead of time, but that's good. Better than the other way around. Is there anything I forgot to mention? I'll tell you what, something that I could mention actually. This is an ongoing thing really, but you know, it might be something that people are thinking about particularly at the moment. But on our website, one of the things you can find there as the resources are template contracts, especially for teaching and live work. There are template contracts on the website that you can download. Quite a few of them now are actually fillable PDFs, and then you just fill in on your computer and don't even need to print off. But there are template contracts there, and you know, those have been a resource that we've had for a long time, but especially at the moment, there might be more people wanting to take advantage of those in relation to their work, because everything's a bit uncertain. So please do have a look at those. There's also information on there, as I said, about it's only very general information. You know, it's not specific, because these things really do depend on the context and the exact situation. But there is some general advice around things like frustration of contracts, force majeure, cancellation clauses, and things like that. And I definitely recommend checking that out in the current situation. Oh, there's another question. Is that another question? Yep. So hi. So hang on, is that another Q&A? I've got the chat. Bethan's asked a question. Bethan's saying about there being a lot of information out there and navigating it being difficult. And I think what Beth's saying, Beth, type if I'm not answering this question. I think what Beth's saying is there is a lot of information out there. I'm very conscious of that. I know that we've kind of skipped through quite a lot of information in a fairly short space of time in this session. That I'd say that the two key things are that Corona Musicians webpage has got a lot of information. It is updated regularly. That's a really good starting point. You know, anything kind of non-music specific, Citizens Advice are a good starting point. So that's things like benefits, as I mentioned, and our website. And then if you have got a question, please do get in touch. As I said, we're very busy, so please do bear with us. But get in touch, and we're absolutely doing our best to get back to everyone as quickly as possible. And at least, even if we can't give you a specific answer to your question, at least try and give some kind of help and guidance and point you in the right direction, even if it's just to the right information online. Because I mean, Bethan's right, there is a lot of information out there. And Neil has said, so how to contact the MU? Let me just shall I put how about, I think I think in the chat I can put a link. So let me just find the right link. I'll put a couple of links in the chat now. So I'll put a link to our website. Let's have a look here. This is our coronavirus page. This is the coronavirus information page that I mentioned. Those are say the key links that I've mentioned. And yeah, and our contact details. Let me just try and find those. Here we go. Excuse my son in the background if you can hear him. And that's our region page. But also, if you go on the website, if you're somewhere, you know, I'm conscious that we're not even meeting up in Wrexham, you can look up the other regions information there. And if you want to join, the key information is here. Oh, let me just type the right thing. Yeah, there you go. There's the joining information, and that's got information on all the different membership offers. As I've said, we do have this join for £1 scheme at the moment, where you can pay £1 for your first 6 months. So if you haven't been a member before, ever, or you've only been a member on a student rate, or you haven't been a member for the last 5 years, then you can just pay £1 for your first 6 months. And so you could essentially you get your first year of membership half price. You get all the membership benefits, but you get your first year half price as a chance to kind of try the MU out and see how we can help you. And if you're a student, or if you if you're a student, there's the specific student rate, which is £20 a year. There's also some partnership rates and things like that. So do have a look online to find out more about that, or get in touch. But certainly the easiest joining route is online. I think time is pretty much up, and I think that's pretty much everything. You know, as I said, you know, please do feel free to get in touch about anything else. And I hope that's been helpful to everyone. You know, things are changing quickly, so this may be out of date fairly soon, but I hope that it's helpful, at least to some extent, for everyone who's been listening. Sorry, someone's just asked. We're about to run out of time, but someone's just asked. The student rate is cheaper than the £1 offer, because the £1 offer it's £1 for your first 6 months. So the whole year is half price essentially. So if you're still a student right now, definitely look up the student rate. There's information on the website about what you need to send us, and you know, the eligibility criteria and stuff like that. But the student rate is still cheaper if you are a student. So have a look at that. And then I think we're pretty much out of time.
That is wonderful, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed for all of that information. I'm really pleased to see questions answered there in the Q&A and in the chat box. So as Andy says, any further questions, do get in touch with him. But on behalf of Focus Wales and Out of Focus 2020, Andrew, thank you very, very much for that. Really interesting, really helpful.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.